Ethan Cole had always lived a quiet life, far away from noise, trouble, and crowds. He preferred the sound of horseshoes touching dry ground over the sound of loud towns. He preferred the endless sky over any roof, and he preferred silence over needless talk. His world was wide and open, filled with hills, cactus plants, and long stretches of land that glowed gold under the Arizona sun. Ethan worked as a cowboy on a small ranch, spending most of his days watching cattle, fixing fences, and riding across lonely paths. People knew him as a gentleman with steady hands and a calm face. He never tried to be a hero or a leader. He simply wanted to work hard, do what was right, and live in peace. One hot afternoon, the sun felt heavier than usual. Even the wind seemed tired as it moved slowly through the desert. Ethan guided his horse along a narrow trail beside a dry creek bed. He planned to check the far fence line before evening came. As he rode, he noticed something unusual near the cracked earth of the creek. At first, it looked like a bundle of cloth, but as he came closer, he saw it was a person, small, still, and clearly hurt. Ethan quickly got off his horse. When he knelt down, he realized it was an elderly Apache woman. Her long gray hair was tangled, her clothing dusty, and her breathing faint. Her hands showed signs of age but also strength, as if they had worked and carried and healed for many years. Ethan felt his heart tighten. He had seen injured animals before, but seeing an elderly woman alone in such harsh heat was different. He called out softly, trying not to frighten her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he asked. Her eyelids lifted slightly. She looked at him weakly, not with fear, but with exhaustion. Ethan could see she had been wandering for a long time, maybe without water. He took his canteen and brought it to her lips. She drank slowly, each sip giving her a little more life. Ethan waited patiently, letting her rest. Most people in the territory kept their distance from the Apache tribes. Tension existed on both sides due to misunderstandings, fear, and old conflicts. But Ethan had never supported harsh treatment or unfair behavior towards anyone. He believed every human life deserved respect. Looking at the grandmother lying on the dry earth, he felt a strong responsibility to help her. When she gathered enough strength to speak, her voice was soft. She told him her name was Nana Atsa. She explained she had come out to gather herbs for medicine, but she had slipped on a rocky slope and hurt her leg. She had tried to walk home, but the pain had become too strong. She had collapsed hours earlier, unsure if anyone would find her. Ethan knew leaving her there was not an option. She needed help, and the sun was only getting hotter. "I'm going to get you out of here," he said gently. "You're safe now." He lifted her carefully, making sure not to hurt her injured leg, and helped her onto his horse. He held her steady as he guided the horse slowly toward a shaded area near some tall mesquite trees. There he helped her sit comfortably while he cleaned her wound and wrapped it with cloth from his saddlebag. He had learned simple first aid skills growing up: how to treat cuts, how to stop bleeding, and how to comfort an injured person. Luckily, her injury seemed serious but not life-threatening. As Ethan worked, Nana Atsa watched him with quiet eyes. She seemed surprised that a cowboy would stop for her, care for her, and treat her kindly. When he finished wrapping the wound, she said softly, "You have a good heart." Ethan smiled lightly. Just doing what any decent person should do. But deep down, he knew not everyone would have stopped. Some might have ignored her out of fear. Others might have avoided her due to prejudice. Ethan felt a small anger rise in him at the thought. No one deserved to be treated as less than human, especially an elderly woman alone in the desert. After giving her more water and letting her rest, Ethan asked, "Where is your family? Do you know how far?" She pointed toward distant hills faintly visible through the heat waves. Her people were camped somewhere in that direction, but she wasn't strong enough to travel alone. Ethan looked at the sun's position. The journey would take hours, maybe all day, especially with her leg hurt. But he didn't hesitate. "I'll take you home," he said. "We'll go slow, and I'll make sure you're safe the whole way." Nana Atsa studied him for a moment. There was trust in her eyes now, a trust she had not expected to find. Ethan helped her onto the horse once more. He walked beside her, leading the horse by the reins. The path ahead was rough, filled with sharp rocks and patches of dry brush. But Ethan moved with careful steps, choosing soft ground for the horse. The heat pressed down on them, but he did not complain or rush. His only concern was keeping the grandmother comfortable. As they moved through the desert, Nana Atsa spoke slowly. She told him stories about her children and grandchildren, about the healing plants she gathered, and about the peaceful life she wanted for her people. Ethan listened quietly, appreciating the gentle rhythm of her voice. The more she spoke, the more he realized how much he had never known about her culture. He felt humbled that she shared her thoughts with him. The journey was long and tiring. At one point, they had to stop under a cluster of rocks to rest. Ethan shared his food with her, even though he had not packed much. She ate only a little and insisted he eat the rest, but he refused. "We both need strength," he said simply. Shadows began to stretch across the land as the sun slowly lowered. They still had far to go, but Ethan remained patient. He could feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, not in a heavy way, but in a meaningful way. Helping her made him feel connected to something greater than his usual routine. It reminded him that kindness had power, but the land was not empty. As they moved forward, Ethan kept glancing around, alert. Sometimes ranch riders passed through the area, and not all of them behaved kindly toward the Apache. Ethan knew he might face questions or even trouble if anyone saw him helping the elderly woman, but he did not let fear guide him. Late in the afternoon, they reached a narrow valley where the light softened and a gentle breeze cooled the air. Nana Atsa seemed stronger now, perhaps not in body, but in spirit. She looked ahead, sensing they were slowly approaching familiar land. Ethan felt hope rising inside him. If he could get her home before nightfall, she would be safe, and her family would know she was alive. But he also knew something else. He was stepping into a choice that might change how others viewed him. Some might judge him, some might avoid him, but he didn't care. Doing the right thing mattered more than fitting in. As they continued forward, Ethan felt a quiet certainty in his heart. He had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but he was ready to face them. Protecting Nana Atsa felt like the only right thing to do, and he would not turn back. Little did he know, this single act of kindness would lead him into a journey that would test his courage and shape his future in ways he never expected. The sun had started to soften by the time Ethan and Nana Atsa continued their slow journey across the open land. Even though the light became gentler, the warmth still lingered in the air. Ethan walked beside the horse, steady and alert, making sure every step was safe for the elderly grandmother sitting on the saddle. Her leg was still hurting, but she tried not to show discomfort. Ethan could tell that she was strong, in mind and spirit, even if her body was tired. The desert stretched out ahead of them, wide and quiet. The land was peaceful, but also unpredictable. Sometimes a strong wind would push across the sand, and other times the air would feel still, as if holding its breath. Ethan watched the sky, the distant hills, and the patches of tall grass carefully. He knew that traveling with someone vulnerable meant being extra cautious. He had no idea what they might face, but he promised himself that nothing would harm her if he could prevent it. Nana Atsa spoke softly now and then, sharing things about her life and the wisdom she had collected over many years. She told Ethan how she learned about healing plants as a young girl, walking with her grandmother through the hills. She described the scent of the herbs, the meaning of different stones, and the deep respect her people had for nature. Ethan listened closely, appreciating every word. He had lived most of his life working the land, but he had never heard someone describe it with such warmth and understanding. "You see things deeply," Ethan said as he guided the horse. "Most people just see dust and rocks." She gave a small smile. "Every place speaks if the heart is patient." Her words stayed with him. Ethan had always felt something peaceful in the land, but he had never had the words to explain it. Hearing her speak made him feel like he was discovering a new way to understand the world he had known for so long. Hours passed, and the desert began to change around them. The ground became uneven, with small hills rising ahead. They entered an area where tall, dry grass swayed in the wind, brushing against the legs of Ethan's horse. The path grew narrower, and it required more effort to guide the horse safely. Nana Atsa's wound made her tense at times, but Ethan reassured her gently. "Just hold on. We're doing fine," he would say. But the land was not the only challenge. As they moved deeper into the territory, the feeling of being watched crept over Ethan. He didn't want to alarm Nana Atsa, so he kept his eyes open without saying anything. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts. Something in the quiet seemed different. After some time, they reached a small rise and stood at the top. From there, Ethan spotted movement in the distance. 3 riders moving lazily across the sand. Their horses kicked up dust as they rode in a loose circle, as if they were scanning the land. Ethan recognized them. They were local ranch riders, usually traveling with loud voices and quick tempers. He knew they weren't bad men at heart, but they often acted without thinking, especially when it came to anyone from the Apache tribes. Ethan's jaw tightened. He hoped the riders would turn away, but instead, they angled their horses toward his path. He felt a small wave of concern. Nana Atsa noticed his silence and looked at him. "Something trouble you?" she asked calmly. "Just stay quiet," Ethan said softly. "Some men are coming this way. Don't worry. I'll take care of everything." He didn't want her to fear anything, so he kept his voice steady. As the riders approached, their expressions changed when they noticed the elderly Apache woman on Ethan's horse. The man in front narrowed his eyes. "What's this?" he called out. "You traveling with her?" Ethan stayed calm and nodded. "She's hurt. I'm helping her get home." One of the riders looked surprised, but another frowned. "That's risky, Ethan. Folks don't like when—" "Doesn't matter what folks like," Ethan said gently but firmly. "She needs help." The riders exchanged looks. Ethan could feel tension in the air, not anger, but confusion. These men were used to treating the Apache with distance, not familiarity. Seeing Ethan walking beside an elderly woman might have challenged what they were used to. "We ain't here to cause trouble," the first rider said. "Just surprised, that's all." "I understand," Ethan replied. "We'll be on our way." Before leaving, the man glanced at Nana Atsa. She looked back at him calmly, without fear. Something about her steady gaze softened the rider's expression. He touched the brim of his hat politely and said, "Safe journey." Ethan nodded. As they rode off in another direction, he let out a slow breath. He knew that conversations like this could easily turn uncomfortable, but he was glad it had ended peacefully. He continued walking, guiding the horse forward. "Your spirit spoke for you," Nana Atsa said after the riders left. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. "You didn't use loud words. You used the quiet strength inside you." Ethan thought about that. He had never been a loud or forceful man, but maybe, just maybe, quiet strength was enough. The desert changed once again as the afternoon stretched on. They reached an area filled with tall boulders and narrow passages of stone. The wind hummed softly between the rocks, creating a peaceful sound. Here, Ethan felt more comfortable. The rocks offered shade, and the air felt cooler. But these passages also made him alert. If anyone approached, It would be harder to see them coming. Still, he kept his steady pace. Nana Atsa trusted him, and he felt responsible for getting her home safely. They stopped to rest again when Ethan noticed that her breathing was getting heavier. "We'll sit for a bit," he said softly as he helped her down from the horse. She sat on a smooth rock, leaning against the warm stone surface. Ethan shared water again and checked her bandage. It was still holding well, though he could tell her leg was swelling a little. "You've been traveling with great patience," he said. "I am grateful," she answered. "Your kindness carries me forward." Ethan smiled shyly. Compliments always made him uncomfortable because he didn't do things for praise. He simply did what he felt was right. After resting, they continued their journey. The sky slowly began to turn orange as the sun moved closer to the horizon. The colors spread across the land, painting the rocks and sand with warm light. Nana Atsa looked at the sky and whispered, "The day is closing gently. It is a good sign." Ethan loved the way she saw meaning in everything. He felt like he was learning not just about her culture, but about life itself. But the peaceful moment didn't last long. As they exited the rocky passageway, Ethan heard distant laughter, loud, sharp, and careless. He stopped instantly. The sound came from behind a cluster of bushes. Ethan knew that sometimes groups of riders drank together near this area before heading back to town. He didn't want to run into anyone who might ask too many questions or behave without respect. "Stay close," he whispered to Nana Atsa. "I'll lead you around." He guided the horse carefully around the bushes, keeping low and moving quietly. The laughter continued, but it stayed distant enough for them to avoid it. Even so, Ethan felt uneasy. People weren't always mindful of how their actions affected others. Once they moved far enough away, Ethan relaxed a little. "Almost there," he said. "Just a little more." The land opened up again, revealing long stretches of desert grass glowing under the fading sun. Nana Atsa looked ahead with hope in her eyes. "My people are beyond those hills," she said. Ethan nodded, feeling relief wash over him. He could sense they were close, though there were still valleys and slopes to cross. As the sky deepened into shades of gold and pink, the bond between them grew stronger. They were not simply a cowboy and a grandmother anymore. They were two travelers sharing a journey filled with trust, kindness, and understanding. Ethan did not know what waited for them on the other side of the hills. He did not know what challenges or surprises would come, but he knew one thing for certain. He would protect Nana Atsa until she reached her family, no matter how long it took. And though he didn't realize it yet, every step he took was guiding him toward a moment that would test his heart more deeply than anything before. The sky slowly changed from soft gold to deep orange as Ethan continued guiding Nana Atsa toward the distant hills. The warm colors painted everything around them in a gentle glow, but even the beauty of the evening could not erase the feeling that the journey was becoming heavier, as if the land itself sensed what was coming next. Ethan stayed calm, but inside, he knew they were entering a part of the territory where misunderstandings often grew quickly and where even kind people sometimes acted without thinking. Nana Atsa sat quietly on the horse, her eyes focused on the hills she called home. Every now and then she sighed softly, not in pain, but in patience. Ethan admired that about her. Even though she was tired and hurting, she showed more peace than most people he knew. They moved slowly because her injured leg made every step feel longer. Ethan wanted to hurry, but he also knew that rushing could cause her more pain. So he stayed at the horse's side, watching carefully, adjusting the reins gently and whispering reassurance whenever needed. As they reached a flat open area, the wind picked up and brushed against their faces. The air felt cooler now, but the silence around them was different, thicker, almost expectant. Ethan stopped for a moment and looked around. He noticed dust rising far ahead, drifting upward in a thin, soft cloud. It was the type of dust stirred only by horses. He narrowed his eyes. "Someone's coming," he murmured. Nana Atsa followed his gaze. Her expression stayed calm, but her hands tightened slightly on the saddle. Ethan moved to the front of the horse and held the reins firmly. He wasn't afraid, but he was prepared. After a few minutes, the figures became clearer. There were 4 riders approaching, moving in a slow but certain line. Their hats, their posture, and the way they directed their horses made it clear. These were ranchers from the nearby area. Ethan had seen them around before. They weren't bad men, but they were known for holding strong opinions. They believed strongly in protecting their land and often reacted quickly when they felt uncertain about something. And seeing an Apache grandmother with a cowboy might create questions they were not ready to ask politely. The riders stopped a short distance away, looking surprised and confused. One of them, a tall man named Harris, called out, "Ethan, that you?" "It's me," Ethan answered, keeping his voice steady. Harris pointed at Nana Atsa. "You know who you're traveling with, right?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, she's injured. I'm taking her home." The men exchanged glances. Ethan could see their confusion growing into unease. One rider leaned forward on his saddle. "Why are you risking yourself like that? Folks talk about these things, you know." Ethan kept his calm. "I'm doing what any person should do when someone needs help." Harris frowned slightly. He wasn't angry, just uncertain. "Ethan, you're a good man, but this could put you in a hard place." "You sure about this?" Ethan stepped in front of the horse, placing himself gently but clearly between the riders and Nana Atsa. He met their eyes one by one. His voice stayed soft, but it carried a firmness they had not heard from him often. "She's a grandmother. She's hurt. She was alone in the heat. I'm not leaving her behind." For a moment, the air felt heavy, as if everything depended on the next words spoken. The riders shifted uncomfortably. They weren't sure how to respond to Ethan's calm strength. And Nana Atsa, sitting quietly behind him, watched in silence, trusting him fully. Harris scratched his head and sighed. "We didn't mean trouble, Ethan. We just didn't expect to see this." "I know," Ethan replied gently. "But there's no trouble here. Just kindness." The words seemed to settle into the riders' hearts. Slowly, their shoulders relaxed. Harris gave a small nod, almost an apology in the gesture. "Well," he said, "if you're sure she's not a danger to anyone." "She's no danger at all," Ethan interrupted softly. "She just wants to get home." Harris nodded again. "All right, then we won't stand in your way." Another rider called out, "Safe travels." Ethan watched them leave, guiding their horses away across the open land. Only when they disappeared over a ridge did he exhale fully. Nana Atsa looked down at him with warm eyes. "You stood like a strong tree," she said softly. Ethan smiled a little. Sometimes standing still is the toughest thing to do. They continued their journey, but now the sky was deeper and the air cooler. The long shadows made everything feel sharper, as if the world was watching closely. Yet Ethan walked forward with steady steps. Something inside him had shifted. Protecting Nana Atsa wasn't just a duty, it was a promise he had made silently to himself, a promise he would not break. As night began to form, they reached the other side of the valley. That was when they heard the sound of horses again, this time coming from behind them. Ethan stopped and turned carefully. Another group of riders was approaching, but this group moved faster, and their horses kicked up more dust. Ethan's heart tightened. The earlier ranchers had left peacefully, but he wasn't sure what the intentions of this new group were. He moved slightly closer to the horse, alert. When the riders came into view, the man leading them raised a hand and slowed his horse. Unlike the earlier group, these men looked more serious, less relaxed, more tense. One of them squinted hard at Nana Atsa, then at Ethan. "What are you doing with her?" the leader asked, his voice firm. Ethan answered calmly. "She's hurt, and I'm taking her home." "That land up ahead isn't safe," the rider said. "We have orders to watch this area. We don't want misunderstandings." Ethan stood taller. "There won't be any misunderstanding," he said softly. "She's going home." The leader studied him long and carefully. Ethan didn't look away. He didn't raise his voice or step forward aggressively. He simply stood there, quiet but unshakable. "You're willing to stand for her?" the man finally asked. "Yes," Ethan answered without hesitation. Something softened in the rider's eyes. After a long pause, he turned his horse slowly and said, "Then pass through carefully. We won't stop you." The other riders followed him. Their departure was slower, more thoughtful than their arrival, as if Ethan's calm courage had created a new sense of respect in them. Once they were gone, Ethan gently placed his hand on Nana Atsa's arm. "You all right?" She nodded. Your heart guided that moment, not fear. They continued walking. The sky darkened fully, and stars began appearing one by one, spreading tiny lights across the sky. The cool night air felt refreshing after a long day, and Nana Atsa's breathing became easier with the softer temperature. Ethan guided the horse through a shallow canyon, listening to the sounds around them. The wind brushing rock walls, distant animals moving quietly, and the soft steps of the horse. It felt peaceful, but also filled with meaning. Ethan could feel the journey reaching a turning point. Every step brought them closer to her people, but also closer to a change within him. They finally stopped near a small, sheltered area so Nana Atsa could rest again. Ethan helped her sip a little more water and sat beside her, leaning against a flat stone. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet night felt deep and calming. After a long pause, Nana Atsa said, "You showed courage today." Ethan shook his head softly. "I just did what I had to." "That is courage," she replied. "Courage is not loud. Courage is steady." Ethan looked up at the stars. He had always believed he was an ordinary man. Nothing special, nothing heroic. But today, he felt something different. Not pride, but a quiet understanding that doing the right thing could change the way people saw one another. After resting a while longer, they continued the journey. The hills were now close, so close that Ethan could see faint patterns of light reflecting off distant campfires. Nana Atsa noticed them too, and hope filled her eyes. "We are near," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "Let's get you home." He didn't know that greater warmth, deeper gratitude, and unexpected blessings were waiting just beyond those hills. He only knew that he would not stop until she was safe. And as they took the final steps of this long, difficult day, a new chapter in Ethan's life quietly prepared itself to unfold. Night had fully taken over the sky by the time Ethan and Nana Atsa reached the base of the last hill. The stars shone brightly, forming a gentle silver blanket above them. The desert, which had burned under the sun all day, cooled into a calm and peaceful place. The moon had risen, casting soft light across the land, guiding their path like a quiet friend who understood their tiredness. Nana Atsa looked ahead with hopeful eyes. "My people are close," she whispered, her voice filled with both relief and anticipation. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest. He had walked miles beside the horse, and though his legs were tired, the thought of getting her home gave him renewed strength. He gently placed his hand on her arm and said, "We're almost there. You'll see them soon." They continued up the gentle slope, the horse moving slowly and carefully. As they neared the top of the hill, Ethan could see faint movements ahead, shadows shifting near a camp. But one shadow moved differently, faster, as if someone had noticed them. It wasn't long before the figure ran steadily up the hill toward them. Ethan paused. And Nana Atza leaned forward, squinting in the moonlight. Then her face lit up with recognition. "It is my grandson," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. The young man reached them quickly. He was breathless from running, his long dark hair tied behind his head. When he saw Nana Atza on the horse, he froze for a second. Then his eyes filled with tears. "Grandmother?" he said softly, his voice breaking. Ethan stepped back and allowed him to approach. The young man carefully helped Nana Atza down from the horse, holding her gently as if she were made of glass. He spoke to her in their language, his voice trembling with relief. She answered in the same gentle words, and Ethan watched quietly, giving them space for their reunion. Even without understanding the language, he could feel the deep bond between them. After a moment, the young man turned to Ethan. His eyes were full of gratitude. "You brought her back," he said in careful English. Ethan nodded. "She was hurt. I found her near the dry creek. I couldn't leave her." The young man placed his hand over his heart, a gesture of respect. "Thank you. You did something very important." Before Ethan could reply, two more figures arrived, an older woman and a middle-aged man, likely Nana Atza's daughter and son-in-law. Both looked worried, but when they saw her safely standing between them, their fear softened into relief. The older woman touched Nana Atza's face gently and then looked at Ethan with kind, grateful eyes. She spoke in her language first, then in English. "You protected her. We are thankful." Ethan gave a humble smile. "I'm glad she's safe now." The middle-aged man stepped forward. He examined Nana Atza's bandaged leg and then nodded with appreciation. "You cared for her well." Ethan shook his head. "She's strong. I just helped a little." But the family didn't seem to think it was a small thing at all. They surrounded Nana Atza lovingly, supporting her as they slowly guided her down the hill toward their camp. Ethan walked beside them, still holding the reins of his horse. He felt strangely out of place, not because he was unwelcome, but because he was entering a part of the world he had never been invited into before. As they reached the camp, Ethan noticed the small community living in harmony with the land. Their homes were simple but warm, made with care and skill. A few people were keeping a fire burning, its soft glow lighting the camp beautifully. The atmosphere felt peaceful, almost like a quiet village surrounded by nature. When the group arrived, several more people gathered around. They gasped softly when they saw Nana Atza, their faces flooding with relief. Ethan could hear gentle murmurs, questions, and words of gratitude, some in English, some in their own language. Even though he didn't know the words, he understood the meaning. One woman brought a warm blanket and wrapped it gently around Nana Atza's shoulders. Another brought water in a clay cup. A young girl offered her a small wooden flute, which Ethan guessed was something special in their family. Everyone touched her hand or shoulder as if reminding themselves she was truly there and safe. Ethan stayed back, letting the family tend to her. He didn't want to interrupt a moment that meant so much to them. But then Nana Atza turned and motioned for him to come closer. Her eyes shone brightly in the firelight. "You brought me home," she said warmly. "You must come sit." Ethan hesitated. "I don't want to intrude." "You are not intruding," her daughter said kindly. "You helped our mother. You are welcome." Ethan nodded and stepped forward. They guided him to sit by the fire. Someone handed him water, another offered him food, simple stew prepared with vegetables and herbs. Ethan felt humbled by their generosity. As he ate quietly, the family began asking gentle questions. They wanted to know how he found Nana Atza, what happened, and how far he had traveled with her. Ethan answered honestly, keeping his voice low and respectful. He didn't exaggerate or make himself sound heroic. He simply told them what happened, step by step. With every word he spoke, the family listened closely, their eyes often filling with emotion. When he finished explaining, the camp grew silent for a moment. Then the middle-aged man spoke. "You showed great kindness," he said. "Many people would not have done what you did." Ethan looked at the fire. "I just couldn't leave her alone." "She told us," the young grandson said, "that you protected her with a brave spirit." Ethan shook his head softly. "I'm not a brave man." Nana Atsa smiled. "Bravery is not loud, Ethan. It is gentle. You walked far for someone you didn't know." She reached out and took his hand in hers. Ethan felt warmth travel through him, not just from the fire, but from her touch. There was something deep and meaningful in her presence, something that made him feel seen in a way he wasn't used to. Soon, a few men brought a wooden stool for Ethan to sit on more comfortably. The campfire crackled softly, and the night air filled with the scent of herbs. The people around him spoke warmly to one another, creating an atmosphere of peace and togetherness. As the night continued, a soft drumbeat began somewhere in the camp. It was slow and calming, like a heartbeat. A few people hummed quietly along with the rhythm. Ethan had never experienced anything like this. It felt sacred, gentle, and full of respect for the land and the people who lived on it. Nana Atsa closed her eyes, listening to the rhythm. Her family gathered around her. Ethan watched peacefully, feeling honored just to be allowed in this space. After a while, the middle-aged man turned to Ethan. "Please rest here tonight," he said. "You have traveled far and you are tired. It is not safe to ride back in the dark." Ethan opened his mouth to protest, but Nana Atsa touched his arm. "Stay," she said kindly. "You are our guest." Ethan nodded at last. "Thank you. I appreciate it." They gave him a soft blanket and a place near the fire. As he settled down, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a deep sense of belonging. The stars shone above, the fire warmed his hands, and peaceful voices murmured softly around him. He looked at Nana Atsa one more time. She smiled gently at him, full of gratitude and affection. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the quiet comfort of the camp. He had only meant to help her, nothing more. But he didn't know that this night, this simple act of kindness, was about to lead him toward a reward far greater than anything he could have imagined. A reward that would not just change his journey, but his entire life. Ethan woke up before sunrise, the soft light slowly filling the Apache camp. The cool morning air carried the smell of wood smoke and herbs. For a moment, he lay still, listening to the comforting sounds of people preparing for a new day. Children's quiet laughter, the soft beat of a drum in the distance, and the gentle whisper of the wind brushing through the trees made everything feel peaceful. He had never stayed in a place like this before, and he already knew that this camp had changed something inside him. The evening before had been full of warmth. The Apache people had welcomed him with kindness, offering food and stories. Even though he was new to their world, he felt no fear. He sensed their respect for Nana Atsa and understood why she meant so much to them. Every person who spoke to him thanked him for bringing her home safely. Ethan felt shy each time, but their gratitude touched his heart. When he stepped outside the small shelter they had given him, Nana Atsa was already sitting on a woven mat. She looked peaceful, her eyes calm and bright. She lifted her hand gently, calling him to come closer. Ethan walked toward her, feeling a soft mix of respect and affection for the grandmother he had protected. She studied his face for a moment, as if reading something deep inside him. Then she smiled in her warm, gentle way. "You have a strong heart," she said quietly. "And a strong heart never walks alone." Ethan did not fully understand what she meant, but he listened carefully. He always listened when she spoke because her words felt like small lessons meant to guide him. A group of Apache men and women gathered nearby. The chief, a tall man with thoughtful eyes, stepped forward. He looked at Ethan with deep respect. "You risked a great deal for one of our elders," the chief said. "Few men would do such a thing during these tense times. Your courage will be remembered." Ethan shook his head. "I only did what was right. She needed help." The chief smiled softly. "Doing what is right is the hardest thing for most people." Nana Atsa nodded, agreeing with her chief. She reached into a small leather pouch beside her and brought out something wrapped in cloth. She untied the cloth slowly and carefully, as if the item inside held great meaning. When Ethan saw it, he breathed in softly. It was a small carved pendant shaped from smooth river stone. The stone was pale with natural lines running through it, and it carried a simple symbol carved with skill. It looked like a rising sun, a sign of hope, renewal, and the beginning of something important. Nana Atsa held it toward him with both hands. "This is for you," she said. "It is made by our best carver. This symbol protects the one who carries it. You have earned it." Ethan hesitated. "I can't take something so special." "You can," she said gently, "because your kindness was special too." Her eyes shone with a kindness that made his chest feel warm. He reached out and accepted the pendant with care. When he held it, he felt the smoothness of the stone, the weight of gratitude, and something more. A connection, a promise that he would never forget this journey. The chief stepped forward once more. "You are welcome in our camp any time. You have shown respect, courage, and kindness. Those things matter more than where a man comes from." Ethan bowed his head slightly, feeling honored beyond words. "Thank you," he whispered. Later that morning, it was time for him to leave. His horse, Dusty, had been fed and brushed by some of the younger members of the tribe, who found his calm nature amusing. Dusty stood quietly as Ethan gathered his things. As he prepared to mount, Nana Atsa walked up to him one last time. She placed her hand on his arm, her touch gentle yet full of emotion. "Remember," she said softly, "a brave heart is not measured by battles won. It is measured by the kindness it carries." Ethan smiled. "I will remember." She gave a small nod. "Your path will open in new ways. Trust it." He did not understand her full meaning, but something inside him told him that her words were true. With a final farewell, Ethan rode away from the camp. He looked back once and saw the Apache people standing together, watching him with gratitude. Nana Atsa raised her hand in blessing, and Ethan felt a quiet strength fill his chest. As he made his way back through the desert, the pendant hung safely around his neck, resting close to his heart. The journey felt shorter this time, somehow lighter. He no longer felt like the same man who had first crossed that land with fear of what others might think. Now he carried a new sense of purpose. When he reached town, people stared at him with surprise. Word had spread. Cowboys, ranchers, and others had already heard bits of the story. Some said he had crossed dangerous land. Others said he had stood his ground against angry men. But no story captured the truth of what he felt inside. At first, Ethan worried people would judge him. The tension between settlers and Apache tribes was still strong. Not everyone respected or understood the Apache people. But something unexpected happened. Instead of being mocked or criticized, people approached him with curiosity. "What really happened out there, Ethan?" they asked. He told the story in simple, honest words, always making sure to speak respectfully about Nana Atsa and her people. His calm and sincere voice made others listen with interest. Before long, townsfolk began asking him more questions, not about fights or danger, but about the Apache way of life, their traditions, and how peaceful their camp had been. Ethan did not exaggerate. He simply shared the truth, the kindness he saw, the unity of the tribe, the wisdom of their grandmother. The more he spoke, the more people began to see things differently. Soon, the local sheriff asked Ethan to speak at a small meeting. The goal was to reduce fear and misunderstanding between the settlers and the Apache tribe. Ethan felt nervous at first, but he knew speaking honestly could make a difference. At the meeting, he told them, "We fear what we do not know. But I have seen their world with my own eyes. They want peace just as much as we do." His words touched people. The room grew quiet, and many nodded thoughtfully. That day marked a small change, a hopeful step toward understanding and respect. Life slowly returned to normal for Ethan, but something inside him stayed different. He worked on the ranch as he always had, but he carried a quiet confidence that had not been there before. He felt stronger, not because he had faced danger, but because he had stood for what was right. Every night when he hung the pendant beside his bed or held it between his fingers, he felt grateful. It reminded him of the journey, the grandmother's wisdom, and the powerful lesson he had learned. Courage is not loud. It is gentle. It lives inside a good heart and grows stronger when a person chooses kindness over fear. Years passed, but Ethan kept the pendant with him always. Some days he wore it while riding across the wide-open land. Other days it stayed safe in a small wooden box. But no matter where it was, its meaning stayed close to him. It symbolized not just a reward, but a turning point in his life. And every time he remembered the soft voice of Nana Atsa telling him that a brave heart never walks alone, he felt as if a part of her wisdom still guided him, like a quiet light shining inside him. The journey he had taken to protect an Apache grandmother had given him more than gratitude. It had given him understanding, peace, and a new sense of purpose. It had changed the way he saw people and the way he saw himself. And that, he knew, was the greatest reward of all.